Hello, welcome to the studying of the book of Genesis, which is the first book of Moses. So before I start to talk about the verses themselves, I think it's a good practice, it's a good idea to just give a little bit of a history, a little bit of an understanding about the book of Genesis. So the book Genesis itself comes from the Greek, which means history. It gives you sort of a history of how the beginning came about. Even in Hebrew, it means in the beginning, because in the Torah, the title of a book in the Bible was dependent on the first sentence. So you know how the first sentence starts in the Genesis saying, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So in the beginning, so that is the title of the Genesis, that in the beginning. It is actually in the first 5 books of Moses, or otherwise or known otherwise as in the Pentateuch. In terms of who wrote the book of Moses, there are philosophers, there are sort of scholars who think, and the idea came about centuries ago that the book of Moses, it took a long time to compile the story to came about, because sometimes you could have like even already that some people think that there could be even a century separation between 2 verses in the Bible, in the Genesis, for example, or even in the sentence, they might be written centuries apart, for example. But in Joshua 22:9 or Matthew 19:8, it is assumed that the writer of Genesis was Moses, which is really important because in Matthew 19:8 it was Jesus who said that the author was Moses, and I tend to lean towards what Jesus says anyway. As to when it was written, in terms of archaeology, they think that the Exodus itself happened around the 13th and the 15th century BC, but many tend to lean towards the 15th century. And so if you take into consideration that Moses died 40 years after the Exodus, you can get a rough idea as to when it was written. As to what was the objective, why it was written, well, it tells you a lot of things Moses tells you a lot of things in the Exodus. It talks about the beginning, it talks about the fall. It gives you a hint of redemption after the fall, that the plan of redemption was already ready at the fall. It talks about how God made a covenant with Abraham, and therefore how he was going to bless the world through his descendants. It talks about, it gives you an idea with Abraham as to how God was going to sacrifice his son, because you could sort of see that God is like an Abraham figure in a sense, in terms of him sacrificing his son. And also it tells you how the Jews ended up in Egypt. So I think it's a very, very interesting book to learn about, to talk about. And see you next time. Bye.